Merci beaucoup, Claude, pour cette introduction. I'm going to make the presentation in English. And I will start with a brief presentation of the campaign Secrets Toxiques. So, can I have the next slide, please? It's a campaign which is led by Génération Future, Nature et Progrès France, and Campagne Glyphosate. And what we are asking for is a proper assessment of pesticides product and not only the active substance. As an introduction, I want to emphasize that many studies have shown that the pesticide product can be up to 1,000 times more toxic than its active substance taken in isolation. So the campaign started in February 2021 at the level of the European Parliament with a letter that has been sent to EFSA, who was signed by 119 members of the French Parliament and members of the European Parliament. And the letter was asking EFSA to make proper products assessment following the decision of the CGEU on which Guillaume Tumrel will get to in more details. Following this letter, many exchanges have followed during about a year with EFSA, ANSES, the French Food Safety Agency, the Commission, and members of the European Parliament. And this presentation that will follow is based on the result of those exchanges. So can I have the next slide, please? So I will make a brief reminder about how the market authorization process works in the European Union for pesticides. So first, basically, we have first the Commission that approves active substances on the basis of EFSA's opinion. And secondly, member states authorize products containing the active substance. So schematically, we could say that the EU authorizes glyphosate and that member states authorize Roundup, just an example. Can I have the next slide? And we have noted in our exchanges with EFSA and the Commission that there is a strong tendency of those institutions to emphasize on this specific aspect of the division of labor. For instance, this is what EFSA answered to the letter that was sent in February 2021, and it's in French, but it says that the active substance assessment is made by the EU first, and then that the pesticide formulation is made by the sole member states before it is authorized on the national territories. Can I have the next slide? That's for EFSA, and for the Commission, we have been told in February, again, by Mr. Klaus Beran, the head of unit of pesticide and biocide at the Commission, that first, a comprehensive scientific assessment for the active substance is made at the EU level, and then secondly, the member states actually authorize each individual plant protection product for each individual use on their territories. So this way of presenting things could lead to believe that EU assesses active substances only and that product assessment is fully in the hands of member states. However, that's not what the regulation 1107/2009 is actually asking. Can I have the next slide, please? So Article 4.1 of 1107/2009 says that an active substance shall be approved if the plant protection products containing it meet the requirement provided in paragraph 2 and 3, which means that they don't have any harmful effect on the long or short term in the human health, or the environment. And Article 4.5 says that these requirements are satisfied if it has been established with respect to one of more representative use of at least one plant protection product. In its decision of October 1st, 2019, so can I have the next slide, please? It's basically the same thing that is said, and also the CGEU emphasized on the responsibility of the European food safety authorities into taking into account the cumulative effects of the product and the representative formulation. I will spare you the reading, but you can go and look at point 67, 68, and 69. Can I have the next slide, please? So in short, the Commission can only authorize an active substance if the representative formulation containing it or its residues has no harmful effect on human health or the environment on the short and the long term. This analysis of the long-term danger of the representative formulation has to be formulated by EFSA, in its opinion. And what we can see is that for the dossier of an approval of an active substance, there is no experimental analysis of the representative formulation that is asked. So the question that we have to ask is, how does the Commission and EFSA comply with the requirement of the regulation 1107, since this analysis of the complete formulation is not asked? So can I have the next slide, please? So we had two answers during our long exchanges of last year with EFSA and the Commission. So in a meeting between MEPs, us and EFSA, EFSA claimed that it was using what is called the adverse outcome pathway. And the Commission referred to the methods that is described in the Article 6.3 of the CLP regulation. So both those methods have in common to use what is called the principle of extrapolation, which means inferring the toxicity of the mixture from the toxicity of its single component. And it's also important to note that the methods, data, and results of this analysis are not published are not available in the assessment reports that are made available by those agencies. So there would be much to say about the ability of this method to actually properly infer the toxicity of the mixture. There was, for instance, a Pan-Europe report on adverse outcome pathway that was very critical on this method, and there could have been much to say also about what is described in the Article 6.3 of the CLP regulation. But even if we are assuming that those methods are accurate, there are strong reasons to be concerned. Because if we want to extrapolate the mixture toxicity from the toxicity of individual compound, we need to know the toxicity of individual compounds in the first place. So can I have the next slide, please? And that's basically where we have a problem. Because so the German Food Safety Authority made a REACH compliance workshop in 2018 and found that 1/3 for this main toxicity database that is used by EFSA to make this extrapolation, 1/3 of toxicity data was non-compliant, and 1/3 of the compounds registered in the REACH database had compliance problems. And so that was in 2018, but since then, ECHA told also us that we made a demand focusing on how was data availability on the toxicity of compounds used as co-formulants in pesticides, and it was about the same result. So 35% of the compounds had toxicological data that was lacking, and the full compliance was ensured for only 25% of those compounds, and this is very recent data. So in the case of missing data, what the CLP regulation provides is that EFSA should ask for an experimental study of the long-term effects of the formulation itself. And if these complementary studies haven't been asked, then the approval of the active substance can be challenged and cancelled by the CGEU because it hasn't been properly assessed according to the requirement of the regulation 1107. So can I have the next slide? So what can the Parliament do in that case? According to what we strongly suggest, is an action for annulment on an approval of an active substance following Article 263 of the Treaty of the European Union. So basically the European Parliament can contest the approval of an active substance within 2 months after the decision on the grounds that long-term toxicity assessment was not properly performed. It has also to be noted that NGOs cannot do this, since jurisprudence tends to consider that NGOs are not directly concerned while the European Parliament is receivable by default. And for us, it's really the only way to know what kind of assessment is actually been done on the representative formulation during the approval procedure for an active substance. Can I have the last slide? So in conclusion, I will say that so we have no certainty that the law is properly applied in the case of the approval of active substances, and we have very strong reason to doubt. And an action in annulment would at least perform a real check on how the long-term toxicity test is performed and whether it is compliant with the regulation or not. And if it's not compliant, it will force the implementation of the Parliament's regulation on pesticides approval in the European Union. And more generally, I want to finish by putting some ideas about evolution of the regulation. First, we need a better transparency at the very minimum, because for now, since this analysis is not published, we cannot go on it, check on whether it has been well done or not. A third person cannot go, check on whether the assessment of the mixture has been properly done. And the secrecy around this analysis really undermines the scientific aspect of it, because the ability to replicate is a condition of science. So the secrecy around the analysis of the representative formulation really has to be lifted. And also I want to finish by emphasizing a very much conceptual problem about how the regulation frames the pesticides in general, because if you have a product that is 1,000 times more toxic than the active substance taken in isolation, then you have a problem with the concept of an active substance, because what defines an active substance is the fact that it carries the toxicity of the product. But if the product is 1,000 times more toxic than the active substance taken alone, then the toxicity is not carried alone by the active substance. So there is also some improvement to make about the way that pesticides are framed between active substance, co-formulant, impurities, and we really have to focus more on the product itself and its effect on the population, on the environment, which is incidentally what the regulation is asking. So last slide, which is thank you for your attention.